Alright guys, I am back yet again with another deck profile for Cardfight Vanguard Deer Days on Nintendo Switch. This time we got version 1 of my Dark States Chronojet deck. So version 1 is everything through the second additional card pass, so through D-Booster Set 10. However, I will point out up front that I went ahead and made this deck post card pass 2 just to be consistent, since my previous deck profile for Petrolka was post card pass 2. However, this deck actually doesn't use any cards from the second card pass, so if you've only bought the first card pass, you still can fully play this deck. Now, there are 2 cards in the main deck that can be replaced with cards from the second card pass that fill a similar role, so I will point those out when I get to them. But anyway, this deck is another one of the encounter decks focused on Chronojet Dragon, a unit that was introduced back in the G era, which this deck revolves around the stride mechanic, which was the main mechanic that was also introduced back in the G era, which back then every deck had access to stride, but in D's series only certain decks are allowed to do so, and this is the first deck that they introduced that had that ability. So anyway, we'll be going through the deck as always, and then we'll show it off in one card fight for you to see it in action. So starting first with our ride deck, we do have our grade 0 starter, which is Chrono Dragon. So it's wrote upon, if you in second, draw a card, same D-Series starter skill as always, and of course the first of our Gear Chronicle encounter cards. So next for the grade 1, we have Mazer Gear Dragon. So he has an auto ability that says when this unit is placed by riding from Chrono Dragon, you draw a card and you get a Chronojet Dragon Crest. So a crest is a new kind of card they introduced to work with the stride decks, which a crest basically sort of works like a token where it isn't in any of your actual decks, it just sort of spawns into existence when an ability calls for it. So crest cards basically work the same way as set orders, except they're not set orders, so they don't go into the order zone, instead they go into your crest zone. But they do grant you a set of permanent abilities, basically for the rest of the game. So just like with tokens, you can't see them in this game when you're outside of a fight, so I will just throw up a screenshot so you can actually see this card and for me to go through the abilities. So this crest card does grant you 4 different skills, first of which is a continuous ability that says you can perform stride and cannot ride grade 3 or greater cards without Chronojet in their card names. So this is the ability that allows you to stride. Again, you know, every deck could back in the day, but now you need this card in order to do so in D-Series, which a very quick explanation for how stride works if you're not familiar with the mechanic. Basically, you have a G deck that is separate from your main deck and is made up entirely of G units, and they are all placed face down in your G zone. And if you've ever played Yu-Gi-Oh, it sort of works the same way as your extra deck, where during your ride phase, after your ride step, you have a stride step, where you can choose a face down G unit in your G zone, and you can pay its stride cost, which most of the time is just discarding cards from your hand whose total combined grade equals 3 or more. Although in D-Series we do have some strides with more specific stride costs, which we'll get to later. But anyway, you pay the stride cost and then you stride that G unit onto your Vanguard circle, and your previous Vanguard ends up becoming a heart card, and your G unit inherits the name and base power of that heart card until end of turn. So you're basically allowed to change out your Vanguard to one of your G units for that one turn and take advantage of your G unit skills, as well as their increased power and their inherent triple drive, since all G units are grade 4. So being able to stride is a very powerful ability to have, and of course it does lock you into only riding Chronojet units, which means you can't just, you know, pop this ride line into another deck and be able to stride with a different boss unit. But anyway, we also have its second continuous ability that says the original power of your grade 3 cards with Chronojet in their card names becomes 13,000. So, as you'll see in a moment, the Chronojet Dragon in D series is actually an exact copy of the one from the G era back in the day, which means he has a base power of 11,000, since that was the standard back then. And of course now the standard is 13,000. So this skill just brings Chronojet up to the same standard as everyone else. And then we have the third continuous ability that says during your turn, if you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Chronojet in its card name, all of your front row units get power plus 5,000 for each face-up card in your G zone. So this is a very powerful snowballing power gain ability, giving a power boost to your entire front row based on how many face-up G units you have in your G zone, which of course as the game goes on you'll get more and more face-up, since at the end of the turn your G units returns to your G zone face-up, so you can't stride into that same one again, but all those face-up G units will be granting more and more power to your front row. So very powerful skill. And of course, since any G unit you stride will inherit Chronojet's name from him being your heart card, this skill will always be online regardless of who you stride into. So extremely powerful skill for this deck. And then lastly we have the auto ability that says at the beginning of your battle phase you can choose up to one of your grade 3 or greater rear guards and increase or decrease its grade to 0 until end of turn. So the point of this ability is one of our strides actually lets us bottom deck one of our own rear guards and then superior call a rear guard with grade +1 of that unit. So since we don't have any grade 4s in the main deck, normally you wouldn't be able to target a grade 3 with that ability and get anything out of it. But this skill lets you change any grade 3 rear guard you have to grade 0. So you could potentially still bottom deck it and superior call a grade 1 off of that skill. So yeah, that skill is just specifically meant to work with that one stride card. So that is the crest that is granted by Mazer Gear's. Skill obviously is very vital for the deck to function, so getting that card is very important. And of course you get to draw as well off of his ability, so he generates some free card advantage for you as well. So then next up for the grade 2, we have Smoke Gear Dragon. So he has an auto ability that says when this unit is rode upon by a grade 3 with Chronojet in its card name, you can Soul Blast 1 to search your deck for up to one grade 3 unit card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and shuffle your deck. So very nice ability, letting you search out any grade 3 unit you want from your deck and get it into your hand. So that does guarantee that you'll be able to pay the stride cost at least once, which you can only stride if you either start the turn as grade 3 or if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3. So that means if you go first, your turn 3, you actually won't be able to stride yet. So no matter what you do, that turn's going to be pretty vanilla, no matter what. But if you go second, then your opponent should already be at grade 3, so you can immediately stride after you ride over him by discarding the card that you searched off of his ability. Or if you do end up having to wait to turn 4, you'll at least already have that card in your hand ready to go. So a very nice skill just for the consistency of the deck. So then lastly we have our grade 3, which is of course Chronojet Dragon. So as you can see, like I mentioned before, this card is an exact copy of the Chronojet Dragon from the original G series back in the day. So he does have 11,000 base power. Of course the crest does bump that up to 13. You will also notice he does not have the Persona Ride icon, so that means you cannot Persona Ride in this deck. But of course with the crest granting your front row snowballing power gain, and the extra drive check you'll be getting from striding every turn, that pretty much more than makes up for it. But anyway, Chronojet does have 2 auto abilities, the first of which is a Generation Break 2 ability, which Generation Break is a restriction, again that was introduced back in G era, that requires you to have a certain number of face-up G units, either on your Vanguard circle and or in your G zone. So for example, if you stride into one of your G units, and you have one on your Vanguard circle, and then you have 2 more face-up in your G deck, then you will be at Generation Break 3 at that point. But this is a Generation Break 2 ability, so you just have to have 2 face-up in your Vanguard circle and or G zone. But if you have Generation Break 2, then he gains this skill that says, when this unit attacks a Vanguard, until end of that battle, this unit gets power plus 5,000, and your opponent cannot call grade 1 or greater cards from hand to Guardian Circle. So this is a pretty good skill, granting Chronojet a little extra power and a pretty good guard restrict, blocking all grade 1 or higher units. So that pretty much blocks all standard perfect guards. They'll still be able to use like Sanctitude or whatever. But severely limiting your opponent's guarding options is always a very nice skill to have. Now, if you stride over top of him, your G unit does not inherit your heart card skills, so your G unit will not be able to gain this ability. You will have to attack with Chronojet Dragon himself in order to use this ability. However, one of our strides actually allows us to de-stride back into Chronojet and stand him and attack with him. So you can take advantage of this skill during that turn. And of course it can be a fallback as well if somehow you can't pay the stride cost and you have to just go with your regular grade 3 Vanguard. You won't be totally vanilla, your Vanguard will be able to actually do something. So then he has a second auto ability that says when your G unit strides during your turn, you can counterblast one to choose one of your opponent's rear guards and put it on the bottom of their deck. So a very nice ability, the one you're definitely going to be getting the more use out of every time you stride over top of Chronojet. You can bottom deck one of your opponent's rear guards. So just being a nice -1 to your opponent and getting rid of one of their units is always a very handy ability. So that is the ride deck. Normally I would move to the main deck at this point, but I believe I'm actually going to go ahead and do the G deck first for this deck. Which, the G deck has the same rules as it had back during the G era, which means you are actually allowed to have up to 16 cards in your G deck. However, at least at this point in Deer Days, there is only 2 different strides available in D-Series, so our G deck actually only has 8 cards in it, because that's all we have access to at this point. But anyway, first off, for the G deck, we do have 4 copies of Interdimensional Dragon Fate Rider Dragon. So this is the first of our G units. As you can see, a G unit has a red base at the bottom. And of course this is another Gear Chronicle encounter card, so it still has the, sort of stone tablet look to it. But it is a grade 4 unit, so it does inherently have triple drive. And you'll notice his power says 15,000 plus. That plus is there because he will be gaining the power of the heart card, which will always be Chronojet, so he'll be gaining 13,000 power on top of that, so he will be at a 28k base on his own. So you can stride into him by choosing 1 or more cards from your hand, with the sum of their grades being 3 or greater, and discarding them. So most of the time you are just going to want to discard a single grade 3 card from your hand to pay that cost, since the triple drive will then make up for the card that is lost. But if for whatever reason you don't have any grade 3s and you do have to discard like a grade 2 and a grade 1 or whatever, then you still can do so in order to stride into this card. But after you stride into him, he does have his auto ability on Vanguard Circle that says when this unit attacks, you can counterblast one and turn a card from your G zone face up and put a rear guard on the bottom of your deck. To search your deck for up to 1 unit card with grade +1 of the card put on the bottom of your deck for this cost, call it the rear guard circle and shuffle your deck. Then you choose one of your units and it gets power plus 5,000 until end of turn for each face-up card in your G zone. So this is a very powerful ability, giving you a 4th attack every turn by letting you bottom deck one of your own units and then call one with grade +1 of the card that you bottom decked. So again, this is the card that will work with the Crest's ability, letting you switch one of your grade 3 rear guards to grade 0. So you can bottom deck it to call a grade 1 off of this ability if you need to. Another important thing about this card is that part of its cost requires you to turn a card from your G-Zone face up. So whatever you turn face up, obviously you won't be able to stride into that game. However, that will go ahead and trigger your Crest's ability to give your entire front row an extra 5k. So that will grant a little extra power to your front row, as well as turning on any of your Generation Break 2 abilities at that point, since you would have one G unit on your Vanguard circle and one face up in your G zone. So it does help getting your Generation Breaks online a little bit faster, as well as powering up all your units. And of course, after you superior call one, you can pick any of your units and power them up again, based on how many face up cards are in your G zone. Which, if this is your first stride, then of course that's just going to be an extra 5k, since you're just going to have the one that you turn face up for his cost. However, if you stride into another copy of him later, of course that is going to snowball, because at that point you would have at least 3 face up, since you would have the one you turned face up off of Fate Rider's skill the first time, the Fate Rider that you strode the first time that returned to your G-Zone face up, and then of course the one you flipped up for your second Fate Rider's skill as well. So this card does have to be your first stride. You'll see why in a moment when I go over our other stride option. But on first stride, he is a pretty powerful card in his own right, and he gets more and more powerful the longer the game goes, mostly thanks to your Crest ability. So very, very good card overall. So then lastly, for the G deck, we also have 4 copies of Chronojet Dragon Next Stage. So you can stride into him by discarding a grade 3 card with Chronojet in its card name from your hand. So he does have a bit more specific of a stride cost, specifically needing you to discard one of your Chronojet Dragon copies, as opposed to just any grade 3. But if you do stride into him, he does have his auto ability, which is Generation Break 2. That says, at the end of the battle, this unit attacked a Vanguard. You can counterblast one and discard 2 cards from your hand. To put this unit into your G-Zone face up, choose one of your Vanguards with Chronojet in its card name and stand it. So this is an extremely powerful skill. It is Generation Break 2. So that means while you can technically stride into this on your first stride, it won't be able to do anything, because at that point you would only be at Generation Break 1, since there's no other way to turn up any face down units in your G-Zone. So this card does have to be your second stride at earliest, so at minimum it is a turn 4 play. But when you do go into it, it is extremely powerful, letting you attack with him and get triple drive, and then counterblast 1 and discard 2 to send him back to your G-Zone face up, and then stand your Chronojet, who has become your Vanguard again, and then you'll be able to attack with Chronojet as well. So you'll get to take advantage of Chronojet's Generation Break 2 ability to gain Guard Restrict. And the Chronojet that you restand doesn't lose any drive checks as well. So you will get an additional twin drive out of it, which makes the skill a ±0, since you're discarding 2 and then gaining 2 extra drives. But you will still get your 4th attack for that turn in the form of a second Vanguard attack, as well as 5 drive checks in total. So you have pretty good odds of hitting at least 1 trigger during that turn. And again, since he sends himself back to the G-Zone face up, then your entire front row will get an extra 5k out of that as soon as that ability resolves, thanks to your Crest skill. So he does require a bit more setup, but he is an absolutely devastating card to go into, and most of the time he can close out games for you. So an absolute powerhouse of a card for this deck. So that is all of our G deck. Moving on to the main deck now. First off, for the grade 3s, we of course do have our 3 additional copies of Chronojet Dragon. Not for Persona Ride purposes this time, since we can't Persona Ride with him, but he is obviously still very necessary to pay the stride cost for next stage. So still a very important card to have. So then the only other grade 3 we are running in the deck is 3 copies of Steam Fighter Bali. So he has a continuous ability that is Generation Break 2. That says during your turn, if any player's rearguard was put on the bottom of their deck this turn, this unit gets power plus 10,000. So pretty good power up ability between Fate Rider and some of our main deck cards as well, being able to put your own stuff to the bottom of the deck. And then of course Chronojet Dragon's on stride skill, being able to bottom deck some of your opponent's rearguards. Then this ability should be online most of the time, making him a 23k beater, and that's before any extra power-up gains from the crest or what have you. So he does just make a good beat stick on your board, and of course you can turn him to grade 0 with the crest skill to bottom deck him for Fate Rider's cost as well. But then he also has his auto ability that says when this card is discarded from hand for the cost of stride, you draw a card. So this is the main point of this card. You don't call him as much as you just discard him for your stride costs. So if you do discard him to stride into Fate Rider, you get a draw to replace him, effectively making the cost for Fate Rider stride free. So just an extremely nice skill in helping you maintain your card advantage. So that is all the grade 3s. Moving on to the grade 2s. First off, we have 4 copies of Upstream Dragon. So he has an auto ability that's Generation Break 1. That says when this unit attacks a Vanguard, this unit gets power plus 5,000 until end of that battle. And at the end of that battle, you put this unit on the bottom of your deck to search your deck for up to 1 grade 1 card, call it to a back row rearguard circle, and shuffle your deck. So a very, very useful skill for this ability, letting you give him a little extra power boost for his attack. Again, that stacks with the other power gains from the crest and whatever. And then after he attacks, you can send him to the bottom to call a grade 1 to your back row. So he won't allow you to get any extra attacks out of it, since he can only call to the back row. However, it does allow you to get another booster out of your deck to make one of your other attacks that much stronger for that turn. It also combos very well with some of the other grade 1s we have in this deck, which I'll go over later. But one very cool combo you can do with this deck when you stride into Fate Rider Dragon, if you can get 2 copies of this into your front row, what you can do is you can put any grade 1 behind one of them, and then leave the back row circle behind the other one empty. And then you can attack with Upstream boosted by whatever grade 1. At the end of that battle, you could bottom deck Upstream to call a grade 1 behind your other Upstream. And then when you attack with Fate Rider, you can bottom deck the grade 1 that boosted your first Upstream in order to call a grade 2 from your deck to the circle that Upstream used to be in your front row. And then you can attack with your second Upstream, boosted by the one you superior called off your first Upstream. And at the end of that battle, then you can bottom deck your second Upstream and call another grade 1 behind the grade 2 that you called off a Fate Rider skill. So if you pull off that whole combo, then all of your rearguard attacks will be boosted that turn, and you would have only had to call 1 booster from your hand. So that is a very nice play that I do like doing in this deck. So next up we have 1 copy of Steam Fighter Argandia. So it has an auto ability that says when this unit is put on Guardian Circle, you can Soul Blast 1, and this unit gets shield plus 5,000 until the end of that battle. And if your G-Zone has a face-up card, it gets shield plus 10,000 instead of plus 5,000. So this is just a good defensive card. It can be potentially a 15k shield if you have a face-up G unit in your G-Zone. So it can work if you guard with it from your hand. It can work if you intercept. It is a Soul Blast cost, which we do have quite a bit of Soul Blasting in this deck. So it's not strictly necessary. If you want to replace this with anything else, you can. But I do like just having it at a 1 of for the extra defensive option. So then lastly for the grade 2s, we do have 3 copies of Amazement Magician. So her auto ability says when this unit attacks, you may Soul Charge 1. So this card is here just to be a soul engine for the deck. Like I said, we do quite a bit of soul blasting with this deck. Now, this is one of the cards that I mentioned that you could replace with something from the second additional card pass. There's a card in that card pass called Servant Falcratia. If you want to replace this card with Falcratia, you can do so. Falcratia lets you put a card from your drop into your soul, and then gain 5,000 power for each grade of that card. So Falcratia can be the same sort of soul engine that this card would be, except she gains more power in the process. So she can be a bit better of an offensive option. However, Falcratia only works when she attacks into a grade 3. So your opponent will have to be at a grade 3 Vanguard in order for her to work. While Amazement Magician does not have that restriction. So Amazement Magician is a little bit faster and can help you get your soul filled up a little bit sooner compared to Falcratia. So I like running Amazement Magician just for the little extra speed. Falcratia is slower but allows for more power. But again, between your crests and everything else, your unit should be hitting for plenty high enough numbers. So I like just sticking with Amazement Magician. If you prefer Falcratia, you can go for her. One thing to point out is that Falcratia's second skill that activates during the end phase will actually not be able to work in this deck because your G unit returns to your G zone before any skills can resolve. And that second skill requires your Vanguard to be a grade 4. So Falcratia's second ability will not work with Stride decks. But if you want to run her just for the first skill as opposed to Amazement Magician, you do have that option. So that is all the grade 2s. Moving on to the grade 1s. First off, we do have 4 copies of Steam Skara GG. So she has her auto ability that says when this unit is placed on rearguard circle, if you have a Chronojet Dragon crest, you can Soul Blast 2 to draw a card, and if this unit was placed by your card's ability, this unit gets power plus 5,000 until end of turn. So this is absolutely one of the best cards in the deck, being a very important draw engine. It is your primary superior call target as well off of Fate Rider skill and or Upstream Dragon's skill. Now, only the power gain is locked to being superior called, so if you do just draw into her and you normal call her from your hand, you still can get the draw ability, which is very nice. But if you do superior call her with any of your cards, she will be at a 13k base for that turn. And of course, if you send her back to your deck with Fate Rider skill, then you can potentially superior call her back out with Upstream or whatever. So you can potentially recycle her ability as well to get that on-call skill more than once. So one of your absolute best combo pieces for this deck, and an absolute 4 of. So next up we have 3 copies of Steam Breath Dragon. So first off, he has a continuous ability that's active when he's in your hand that says while you are paying the cost for Stride, this card may be discarded as a grade 3. So if you don't have any other grade 3s in your hand, you can discard him to pay the entire Stride cost for Fate Rider Dragon. And then he also has his Activate ability, which is also active while he's in your hand, that says if you have a Chronojet Dragon crest, you can discard this card to search your deck or drop for up to 1 grade 3 card with Chronojet in its card name, reveal it, put it into your hand, and if you search your deck, shuffle your deck. So this ability is very nice, letting you basically swap him out from your hand with a Chronojet Dragon, either from your deck or your drop. So that gets the specific card you need to stride into next stage into your hand, if you'd rather go into next stage as opposed to Fate Rider. So just an extremely helpful card in helping you go into whichever stride you want to go into at the moment. So next up we got 2 copies of Gear Sero of Magnetic Resonance. So he has 2 continuous abilities. First of which says during your turn, if any player's rearguard was put on the bottom of their deck this turn, this unit gets power plus 5,000. So again, this should be active most of the time between all of your different skills, making him a 13k body during your turn. And then he has his second continuous ability, that is a Generation Break 1 skill, that says this unit gets Intercept and can intercept from the back row. So this is another good superior call target for Upstream Dragon skill. So if you superior call him to your back row off of upstream, then he will be able to intercept from the back row. So it gives you another defensive option, letting you have another 5k intercept out on your board. And of course, he can be a 13k booster while he's back there as well. So a handy card for the deck. Again, it's not super vital. If you want to replace it with anything else, you can feel free to do so. But I do just like having him for his little added versatility. So then next we have 3 copies of Falcate Performer. So his auto ability says when this unit boosts, you can choose up to 1 card from your drop, and if your soul does not have a card with the same grade as that card, put it into your soul. So this is just meant to be another soul engine for this deck. Between using GG's skill a lot, as well as, you know, smoke gear in your ride deck, using up your soul pretty fast, you're very rarely going to have 4 soul. So you should always have at least 1 grade that you're missing in order to be able to put from your drop back into your soul. So being able to help refuel your soul just by boosting is a very helpful ability. Can be used very early game as well, when you obviously won't have all 4 grades in your soul at that point. Now again, this is the other card that you can replace with something from the second card pass. There's a card called Steamskara Zargon that again does something very similar. When she boosts a unit, she can give an ability to that unit that says when its attack hits a Vanguard, you can put any 2 cards from your drop into your soul. So she can be more soul efficient since she can get 2 cards into your soul instead of 1, and they don't have to be of any specific grade in order to do so. However, she does require the unit that she boosts to hit a Vanguard, which, you know, especially if you put it behind your Vanguard with your stride being super powerful, she should be able to boost something that hits a decent amount of the time. But generally speaking, I don't like putting, you know, options like that in control of my opponents, since if they wanted to, they could just guard it to shut down your soul gain ability. So I prefer Falcate Performer since I don't have to rely on hitting anything, and I find him to just be more consistent. Even though it does slow down the soul gain, I usually find that I end up having enough soul for what I need to do. So yeah, if you want to replace Falcate with Zargon, you can feel free to do so. But I do just prefer Falcate because I don't like giving my opponents that much control over what my deck is able to do when I can help it. So then lastly for the grade 1s, we do just have our Sentinels. So first off we have our 3 copies of Steam Maiden R-Limb, with just your standard Perfect Guard, Encounter Perfect Guard, of course. And then lastly our 1 copy of the Blitz Order Elementaria Sanctitude, which you can play without paying the cost if your opponent's Vanguard has triple drive. And this card does require your Vanguard to be grade 3 or less, but of course since your G unit returns to your G zone at the end of the turn, you always will be at grade 3 during your opponent's turn. So your striding will not interfere with being able to use this card. So that's all the grade 1s. Moving on to the grade 0s, we just have our trigger lineup, which is 7 crit, 4 draw, 4 heal, and 1 over. So starting first with the crit triggers, we have 4 copies of Stem Deviate Dragon. So crit with a skill, at the end of the battle it boosted, you can put into your soul to choose one of your units, and it gets power plus 2,000 until end of turn. So just another soul gain option for the deck. Additionally, we have 3 copies of Lively Breath Dragon, just your vanilla crit. Next up for the draws, we have 4 copies of Rouse Wildmaster Riley. So draw with a skill. If your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, get shield plus 5,000. So you're a 10k shield draw trigger. Next for the heals, we have 4 copies of Steamskara Malnigal. So just the vanilla heal. Of course you can run any of the effect heals if you so choose. And then lastly for the over trigger, we have our 1 copy of Hades Dragon Deity of Resentment, Galmage Held. So his additional effect, It says you get during your turn, all of your Vanguards get power plus 10,000, critical plus 1 until end of this fight. So grants a skill to the fighter, giving you basically a permanent crit to your Vanguard, which can be very nasty in this deck, especially on next stage turns, since that power and crit will apply to both next stage and Chronojet after you de-stride into him. Again, making Chronojet's guard restrict even more dangerous. So that is the deck. So we will go ahead and have our one fight with it. And we'll face Yuki this time. And we will be going second. Very nice. Alright, so we'll discard Chronojets, I think, to ride Mazer Gear. Chrono Dragon will let us draw. And then Mazer Gear will let us draw again, as well as giving us our Chronojet Dragon crest over here in our crest zone. So I could call something here, but anything I call will get retired by Blaster Dark. So I think I'm just going to attack, which the crest skill will resolve even if you don't have a grade 3 out. So you just had to resolve it, but it doesn't do anything. So then we can attack. And we get a draw trigger, nice. And she does get her Bedivere and K row, so that'll be hitting pretty good numbers. And of course Blaster Dark has Twin Drive now, so we will let that one through. She gets a crit trigger right off the bat. And we get another draw trigger. And I think I'll go ahead and let that one through too. And we get a crit trigger that is wasted, unfortunately. Alright, so we'll discard one of these Amazement Magicians to ride. So then, let's see, we will go ahead and call Amazement Magician over here. And we'll call Gigi behind her. So Gigi's skill activate and let us Soul Blast 2. And draw a card. So I think I'll just go ahead and attack. And resolve the crest skill again, which does nothing. So we'll attack with the Vanguard first. So then we can attack with Amazement Magician, boosted by GG. And Amazement Magician skill will let us soul charge one. So she called Ease Rod to our back row center, so she will get her full 4 attacks this turn. And let's see, I believe I will guard that one. And I'll let that one through. So let's see, we'll guard and intercept for that one. And we'll just let that one through. And we get a heal trigger, nice. So we'll heal 1. And the power is wasted. And then we drew our over trigger. But then we'll go ahead and discard Gear Sarrow to ride Chronojet Dragon. And Smoke Gear will let us Soul Blast one. And add a grade 3 from our deck to our hand, so we'll add Bali. So now we can do our stride step, so we can choose a unit to stride. So we'll choose Fate Rider Dragon. And now we have to discard a grade 3 from our hand, so we'll discard Bali. So Fate Rider becomes our Vanguard and triggers both of Bali and Chronojet skills. So Bali's skill first will let us draw 1. And then Chronojet skill will let us counterblast 1. And we can bottom deck 1 of her rear guards. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of Bedivere. So I'll go ahead and use Steam Breath's activate ability to discard him, and we'll grab Chronojet out of our deck just to deck thin a little bit. So then we'll go ahead and call Upstream Dragon over here, and another one to our front row as well. And I think we are good, so we will go ahead and attack. And again, the crest resolves and does nothing since we have no grade 3s out. So we'll attack with our right upstream first, boosted by GG. And upstream's generation break will give him an extra 5,000 power. And she guards. So now upstream skill will send himself to the bottom of the deck. And we can call a grade 1. So we are going to superior call... we'll call Gear Sarrow. And put him over here. So then we can attack with Fate Rider Dragon and use his skill to counter blast. And we had to flip one of our G units face up, so we'll flip one of these next stages. And then choose a rear guard to send to the bottom, so we will send GG. And since she's a grade 1, we can Superior Call a grade 2 from our deck. So we will Superior Call out... we'll go ahead and call Argandia. And then we can give a unit plus 5k, so we'll give Argandia that power as well. And we get a crit trigger, so crit to the Vanguard and power to Argandia. So now we'll have upstream attack boosted by Gear Sero. And upstream again will gain 5k thanks to Generation Break. And she lets that one through too. But she gets a crit trigger that time. But upstream skill will once again let us send him to the bottom. And Superior Call a grade 1. So let's say we only have one card in our soul. So we'll call Falcate Performer actually. And put him right there. So then let's see what is in our soul. We got Amazement Magician. So we'll have Argandia attack boosted by Falcate. And Falcate skill will let us put a card from our drop to soul as long as we don't have one of the same grade. So we'll go ahead and send Mazer Gear back to the soul. And she does perfect guard Argandia's attack. And she did not get her Persona Ride, so that is going to hurt her offense quite a bit this turn. But she did get another Bedivere in front of K. So let's see, we will go ahead and let that one through. And we get a heal trigger, which we don't get, but we do get the power. And she will get to counter charge and soul charge since that attack hit. So we just need 5 to block that, so I think I'll intercept from the back row with Gear Sero. And let's see, we'll go ahead and perfect guard that just to be on the safe side. And discard that draw. And she gets a heal trigger when she does get. So then we'll go ahead and guard that one with a crit. Alright, so now we do not want to ride. And instead we want to stride into Chrono Dragon next stage. So we discard Chronojet Dragon from our hand. So this triggers Chronojet's ability again to let us counterblast. And we can bottom deck a rear guard, so again we'll get rid of Bedivere. So let's see, we have our 2 soul now, so we can go ahead and call GG. And we'll put her over here. And use her skill to Soul Blast 2. And draw 1. And we drew Bali. So I believe I'll go ahead and call him over here, and he'll gain 10k thanks to his own ability. And of course another 10k from the crest. So I'll go ahead and use Steam Breath again as well to discard him and grab the last Chronojet out of our deck. So I think we are ready to go. So we will go ahead and attack. And the crest skill will change Bali to grade 0, which doesn't matter since we're on next stage and not Fate Rider. But whatever, we'll go ahead and attack with Chrono Dragon next stage. Is he perfect guards? And we got no triggers off of that. But now we can use next stage's ability to counterblast, and we have to discard 2. So let's see, we'll drop Falcate and one of these GGs. So next stage returns to our G zone, which gives another 5k to our whole front row. And Chronojet stands so he can attack again. So we'll attack with Chronojet Dragon, which triggers his Generation Break ability to gain 5k and Guard Restrict. Oh, she got let it through. If we can get a crit here. And we got one, nice. So crit to the Vanguard, and we'll give that power to Argandia. But we might have her right here. And no trigger, so we got her with that one. So there you go. That was my Chronojet Stride deck. Very powerful deck. Probably one of the most powerful decks in Deer Days, at least. So anyway, I will be back soon with more deck profiles. I believe next up I will be doing another encounter deck, actually, with Minerva. So until then, I guess that's all for this video. So lots of luck to you and yours.